Welcome to Growth Enablement Madness, where I get mad as hell when a company isn't growing or scaling and they're using technology. Today, by the way, I'm Jim Ward. I'm CEO of BrainCell. And today our guest is Ed Kless from Sage Software, who I've known for a long time as well. Ed, welcome.
So great to be here, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and thanks for having the best microphone again. We just had another podcast this week where they had a great microphone, and I've got mic envy. So
yeah, well,
look at you.
Yeah, professional podcaster.
Yes, right. So we're the neophytes here. Can somebody look up neophyte just to let me know if I use it right?
No, you're good.
Okay, thanks.
I'll provide a description later.
Awesome, good. Hey, Ed, so I know a lot about you, but the audience obviously doesn't. So tell me about yourself. What makes you tick? What do you do at Sage? Give it to me, brother.
Well, I'll start with my why. My why is that I believe that entrepreneurs continue the work of creation. And I want to do anything that I can to help entrepreneurs in that work. And fortunately, I've worked my way into position at Sage, which I personally think is the best job anyone could possibly have, because I'm more of an academic than I am a business type role. Mm-hmm. And I get on podcasts. I have my own podcast. I talk. I do presentations. I'm not responsible for revenue, and yet they send me a paycheck every 2 weeks. So it's really a wonderful, beautiful thing, actually. But in all seriousness, I came up with this term meta consultant about 2 years ago, because what I do is I primarily consult with people who do consulting, whether they be folks who do CRM systems or ERP, or even with our Sage Accountants Network folks, which is where I technically report into now at Sage. And these are folks who just recommend our products in a lot of cases to their customers. So I want to make your businesses better. I've never been a person to say, how can I help you close this deal or transactional? How much are you going to do for us this month, this quarter, this year? But what is it that I can do to help you make your business better? Very much in alignment with what you guys are doing from a growth enablement strategy. So I think it's a good synergy here.
Yeah, it is. Thanks. We've often talked about that. So, and also I want to introduce my sidekick, Sarah Reed, who's our Vice President of Marketing.
Yeah. Nice to be here, Jim. I'm just here for the laughs.
Thank you, Sarah. Always good to have. We'll make sure you do laugh. Required. Anyways, also I want to introduce Brian Anderson, our producer of this podcast.
Hey, Jim. Thanks for showing up today.
Thanks for having 2 in a week. All right. So I didn't want to continue with some questions with you, Ed. Tell me, what are you currently reading, or what have you recently read that is one of your favorites that you've
currently reading right now? Just hold it up for you right here. So this is The Data Detective by Tim Harford. Subtitle is The Easy Rules to Make Sense of Statistics. And it is absolutely incredible. Really loving the book. I'm about halfway through it right now. But he opens with this great story about this artist or art critic who discovered what he thought to be a Vermeer. And what was interesting about it is he was like the default expert on what was and was not Vermeer paintings. And he comes across it, and he was overcome with emotion, which should be the key right there. In fact, his quote is, while this is different from all of his other paintings, it is in every way a Vermeer from the master himself. Turns out that he was totally sucked in, and it was not a Vermeer at all. And had he paid attention to the actual evidence, it was a crappy painting.
Yeah.
But he wanted so much for it to be a Vermeer.
Yeah.
That he was sucked into it. And that's the opening story of the book. And it's much, much deeper than that. But I highly recommend it, because I think this is something that we all are susceptible to, and that is to misunderstand statistics. And I think we are oftentimes misled, oftentimes not even purposefully, by folks in the media, especially with the advent of what's happened with COVID and understanding statistics around there. So many people don't understand what's the difference between the different case types. Well, we say, well, it's got a 5% recovery rate, or no, it's not a 5% recovery. That's only those who are actually diagnosed with the disease. Big difference between the number of cases reported and the number of actual cases out in the wild. Sometimes that's a 10 or often 100-fold difference in cases, and you can get so sucked into looking at data. I have often thought of as data inside an organization become a substance abuse problem. I think leaders and managers, it's like they get a little bit of data and then they want more and more, and they crave it, and they go deeper and deeper until the point where the data is actually meaningless. And one of my favorite quotes is from Clayton Christensen, who said, "Conclusive data is only available about the past." And if you want to talk about growth, if you want to talk about the future, right, you have to have a theory that you posit and test to see if it's right or not. And unless your theory is tomorrow is like today plus 10%, which turns out to be a pretty lousy freaking theory, you can't use financial data to predict future financial success. So that's what I'm reading about right now, is all of this stuff about data.
So that's very interesting. And as a growth enablement company, we often work with clients around data, right?
Mm-hmm.
Predictive data, things that will give them a sense of whether they're going to hit plan, et cetera. Does the book address those kinds of things?
Yeah, it does. And what's interesting about this has been, some of this stuff has been known for years. My co-host of my radio show, Ron Baker, wrote a book a number of years ago called Measure What Matters. And he's the one who actually taught me this concept, that the way to predict future financial performance isn't to look at past financial performance. After all, it's on every single red herring stock that when they pass out to try to go public, right? The prospectus, printed on everything. Past performance is not a future indicator of success, right? It's like on the first page, but yet we like to think that it is. What is predictive of future financial success is something that you can't get from your accounting system, which is something like Net Promoter Score. Mm-hmm. If your Net Promoter Score is increasing over time, and if you're measuring it in waves, say every month with a different set, and you see that your Net Promoter Score is going up, I would make a prediction that you would have better future financial performance based on that.
Right.
Right. So you can't predict financial performance by using financial metrics, because all of those are about the past. Accounting is a past participle, right? We're accounting for it in the past.
Yep. So that's we're in agreement. I just wanted to make sure, because we look at profit and loss statements, for example. It's historic data. Yeah. By the time you get that data, it's too late. I mean, if your sales are down now, what are you going to do to increase them over the next quarter? It takes you, could take you a year to fix what happened in the past. It's a rear view mirror.
That's right. Ron says it's like accountants come in and bayonet the wounded.
Right. Yeah. I love it. Yeah. So you've got to have multi-sources for the data that are relevant, to the objective you have in mind.
Well, and interestingly enough, I think that the ease of measurement of data and the use of that data is inversely proportional. In other words, if something is really easy to measure, it's probably not very good at being predictive.
Right.
If something that's harder to measure is probably better at predicting something in the future. So there's that inverse proportion. And I think what unfortunately happens is so many people just opt for the easy metric. The terrible, horrible story that I've seen cited multiple places is body count in Vietnam. They use body count as the metric for success. Of course, what they didn't realize is that, yes, okay, if you kill a Viet Cong, it's one less Viet Cong. However, if you kill the family member of someone who is not a Viet Cong, it creates 10 more Viet Cong.
Right.
And even McNamara, who was the one who put this metric in place later on in his autobiography, said that was one of the biggest mistakes of his career in life. Putting that because it was easy to roll up. It was easy to measure.
That is a great example. Wrong metric, right? And so when you're in a company or you're trying to get predictive data, be careful of wrong metrics. Mm-hmm. That'll guide you down the wrong path. I can't think of one right now, but maybe you could.
I
Oh,
can.
but so,
Oh, tell
good.
me, Sarah. Yeah.
Even just like measuring from a marketing perspective, if you're only looking at the number of leads you're generating and you're not looking at the number of leads that convert to an SQL, to an opportunity, to a closed one, if you're only looking at volume of leads, like that could lead you totally down the wrong path, because none of them may be converting, or a small amount may be converting. So it's not going to lead to revenue.
And take that even further. It's are the leads converting and becoming profitable sales? See, that's even harder. So
great.
So the example of it being even harder is, how do we measure the profitable sale later?
Yeah.
But of course, that would be a better metric to predict future success. But again, it's harder to measure, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's this inverse proportion to these two things.
Yeah. Or are you selling to the right customer, because you may be going down a completely different path than what you had intended? Oh, that's great. Thanks, Sarah. See, look at you. Look at you go.
See, I pay attention.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
I do more than just laugh.
So let's, you and I have talked about growth for growth's sake, and I think you have the analogy to the cancer cell. I think, that's the one thing I remember you telling me, and of course, so let's discuss the market share myth, and tell me a little bit about your thoughts about that.
Yeah, and again, this is Richard Miniter wrote a book called The Myth of Market Share back in, I think it was the early 90s, and it's one of the best books on this topic. The examples are dated. He often uses car companies as an example, but I think we can still learn from them. He said that most people think that if we grow market share, we can then be more profitable. Mm-hmm. It's the exact opposite, actually. He says you need to grow profitability first and then decide if you want to expand your market share. And now there's example after example, but the one that I like to cite, and I don't have the latest statistics on this, so this goes back about 2 or 3 years, but Apple at one point had 120% of the profit in the mobile phone space. So I want you to think that through. How is it that a company has 120% of the profit in a space? It means what? The others are doing what? Losing money.
Down.
Right.
We're going down.
Right. They are actually losing money selling everything. But Apple only had about a 30% market share. And people are like, well, look at Android is kicking their butt. They've surpassed Apple as far as market share is concerned. Who the hell cares?
Right.
Right. Would you rather have, 120% of the profit in an industry, or 30 or 40% of the market share?
Right.
And I think and that's the same thing that happened with that Miniter talks about in his book. He talks about GM and Toyota. And bizarrely, like in 2005, I think it was, Toyota and GM sold within, I don't know, it's something ridiculous, like 50 cars of one another in the United States. That's how close it was. The total number of cars was within 50. Toyota was profitable, $2 or $3 billion profit. GM lost money. How does that make any sense if market share, it needs to be your focus, because it's the same market share, right?
Yeah.
Of course, the issue is that you had to take a look at GM's financial statement to learn that it was not a car company anymore by that time. It was actually a pension fund that happened to make cars.
Yes, right. Thus the losses, I'm sure. But right, good point about. And so that kind of leads us for growth for growth's sake. Your cancer cell analogy. Tell the audience a little bit about that analogy.
Yeah, and I'm forgetting. I'm quoting someone else. It's not the quote is not original to me, and it's probably in the Myth of Market Share, the person who actually said it. But is it growth for growth's sake is the ideology of a cancer cell, not a sustainable business model. I mean, if you think about what growth is, what cancer is it's cells that multiply without restraint.
Right.
And this is where you have to be careful as with your concept of being a growth enablement company. Growth is good. I never want to dismiss growth, but I'm in business now about 30 years. I could probably go into most organizations and double their sales in the first year.
Yep.
I don't have a problem with that. I would put them out of business doing it.
Right.
But I could double the revenue number. If that is solely what I'm supposed to do, double revenue, I'll make it happen. But you won't survive.
Right. Which is why we underscore in growth enablement scale,
Mm-hmm.
which is the concept of improving your net profit margin or your EBITDA. We talk about that all the time, and that it's more about creating a greater value at the bottom line while you're growing. So
Yeah.
plus the technologies that we're providing to help for that scale, to augment humans, for example, high cost. And I think technology is getting us there now.
It is, because I mean, eking out variable cost is the second most important thing in growth that enables profitable growth, I should say. If you can reduce your variable costs, and that's what a lot of systems do. The number one driver, by the way, is price. Your ability to hold your price and set your price is the number one driver in profitability by far.
Mm-hmm.
It's by a factor of at least 2 or 3. So, for example, I guess this is part of the deal is you have to use Apple as an example. They have $300 billion in cash.
Right.
And they do that because Apple is a great pricer. They are a great pricing organization. They know how to set and hold price. They have no desire to be the low price leader in a particular market. In fact, the exact opposite. These headphones that I'm wearing are $600. And I was happy to buy them. I love them. They're the best headphones I've ever had in my life.
So they can be a price driver with that.
Because they're the price leader in the industry, because they are willing to sacrifice market share,
right,
for price. These don't go on sale, and even if they do, it's like a $20 gift card on the day after Thanksgiving. That's
yeah.
Right. That's all you get from Apple.
It resonates with me because we're a bootstrap company. We've never taken any monies from the outside, so we must grow through scale and profit. We can't grow, as the earlier example would suggest, just for growth's sake.
No. And let me just one step further on this. I want you to think about, like, so many companies think that, all right, discount, and even it's reflected in financial statements, right? When you see revenue less discount, right? Where the discount is at the top line, right?
Yep.
That's not where you should put it on your financial statement, because a discount is not off of the top line. It's actually off of the bottom line. There's no difference in cost. So a 10% discount off your top line is incredible, because you actually have to bring that to the bottom line. What you should do is you should do net income and then put discounts underneath it.
Interesting concept. I wonder how a lot of these SaaS companies would perform, because you look at a lot of these SaaS companies today who are growing exponentially. Mm-hmm. I can think of a few. I'll leave them nameless. But what's happening with them, right? They're growing, and yet they're not profitable. Tell me your thoughts there.
It is fair, but the reason is because they have changed the business model. They are what John Murillo calls, they have automatic customers. They don't worry about, are we going to have customers next month? In fact, they can predict what their revenue is going to be next month within 98% certainty.
Yes, right.
And that's why they are highly valued, because they can predict that revenue. Whereas a company that has been selling on-premises solutions and even doing consulting on-premises, you got to get a new customer every month, every quarter, in order to keep that going. Whereas if you have the automatic customer, you have that subscription model in place, you already know what your predicted revenue is going to be within a fairly high level of certainty. And that's why these companies are valued the way they are.
Love it. Yeah. We were talking a second ago about adding technologies for scale. A lot of AI being talked about that includes AI, artificial intelligence. We talks about machine learning, natural language processing. But that comes with some change, right? Because I think there's one of the things that's happening is there's fear that we're going to take jobs away from humans. So let's just talk about change a little bit. Change management. Getting folks over the hump of thinking about these things, that it's not right. How do you deal with change?
Well, it's such a great subject too. But I'm going to go to a hero of mine, Werner Erhard, who was the founder of EST. You might remember that, Jim. From my parents were a little bit involved in this in the 70s. The Erhard seminar training. EST.
Can't say that I know it.
Okay, so he's a really interesting guy. If you watch The Americans, did any of you watch the TV show The Americans?
I started watching it.
Okay, now you hit on something I do know.
Okay, so Philip is going to EST. That's the group that he's going to. If he in the second or third season, he starts to go to the Erhard seminar.
I'm not there yet, so don't.
It's not a big spoiler. It's not a big spoiler, but
Spoiled it.
He kills everybody.
Him going to EST doesn't spoil it. But that's what we're talking about. No, and the reason why you should know Werner Erhard too, for one reason and one reason only, is he's one of the few people who beat the IRS in a tax case. They came after him and he won in tax court. He beat the crap out of him in tax court, which is why he's my hero, by the way.
Okay.
So, but he said this. He said all transformation is linguistic. If you want to change the culture, you must change your language.
Tell us more.
So let's talk about this in terms of subscription too. I actually want to. I used to say I want people to stop who do professional services or professional firms. I don't want them to call them clients. I want them to call them customers.
Okay.
Now I don't want you to call them customers. You know what I want you to call them? Members.
Yeah.
I want you to get members. Do you remember the ad campaign for American Express about 15 years ago? Membership has its privileges.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Love that. And what I want you to see, I want your what you thought of as clients or what you thought of as customers to now think of them, and you thinking of them and them thinking of themselves as members. Members in an elite group that is your company. That you provide them access not only to your brilliant brain, but the brains of everybody who is also a member.
Good. I see Brian writing this down. This is perfect. Sarah.
Because
I was noting it too.
Because in my view, there's four forms of capital. There's financial capital, which we all know. There's also the structural capital, which is like our the stuff that goes away or the stuff that's still in the building when we leave. So our computers, our phone systems, all that, that's the structural capital, right? We also have our intellectual capital, which is our knowledge. But the fourth form of capital is our social capital. And your grandmother put it this way: it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Okay. Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I submit to you that the most valuable form of capital that we all have is our social capital. The four of us on this line here are unlikely to ever be completely and totally destitute, even if our businesses lose money. Why? Because there's probably many people in our lives who'd let us sleep on their couch if push came to shove. Because of the people that we know. The people who are poorest in this world are those that lack social capital. Lack access to other social capital, that have literally nowhere to go.
Excuse me. Teams message just in from Sarah. She said no couch surfing here. I don't.
Yeah, but that's so
Teams
interesting
messages
to think
are
about.
not supposed to be brought up on. You don't.
Right.
The first rule of Teams is you don't talk about Teams. No, I'm kidding.
Sorry. Okay.
But in all seriousness, I think that's and if you can create a mystique around your organization as a membership organization, an elite group that people want to be part of, that's the allure.
Mm-hmm.
That's the example that John Royal uses in his book Automatic Customer is. You know what Club 33 is? Any of you know what Club 33 is? Okay, it's a building 33 Main Street on all Disney properties that you have to be a member of in order to get in. They have a waiting list of about 6 years long. You can Google it and try to join. It's also the only place, especially in Disney World and in Disneyland, where they sell alcohol. Just a little tip.
Plus the 6 year waiting.
Exactly. Right. but it's an exclusive membership club within Disney. Who's got, well, Peloton has this now too. I think it's called the Emerald Club. These are all exclusive.
Peloton?
Yeah.
Is that how it's pronounced?
I don't know.
Peloton?
That's how I pronounce it. Peloton? I don't know.
The
Peloton?
bike?
Peloton. Yeah. Peloton.
Peloton.
Okay, thank
Peloton.
God I wasn't out of the loop on
No, it's
that.
all right. But I know they do have this thing called an Emerald Club, which you have to be invited in by someone else who's in it.
Right.
And again, it's this creation of this exclusivity that is huge in value creation in my view. How do you create that mystique around it? And so, but getting back to your question about,
sorry to interrupt, but Clubhouse is another new app that's come out that is exclusive to that. Right.
Yep. You got to be invited in. I have my dentist will only take new patients who refer by referral. Like you can't, unless you know someone who goes to him as a dentist, you can't get in to see him.
Funny how we all want to be where it's hard to get into the nightclub as a line outside, and by the way, I'm not in nightclubs anymore. Just a note.
But you can, but I mean, these are the things we can learn from this and apply it to business. And I think, the exclusivity thing, I think, is something important because that's one of the things that you can do as a small business. It almost by definition, you're small. So you got to create exclusivity around it. That's by definition.
Right. So we're talking about change. I guess how do you begin to make change happen in organizations?
Yeah, and that's where the language comes in. And I really do think it is something as simple as changing the language that you use to describe whatever it is that you like using member instead of customer. Yeah. I'll give you an example, Jim, and I know you probably remember this. And there's a lot of good and bad that can be said of Stephen Kelly, who's a former CEO of Sage. But one of the things that he did when he first came in, within the first month or so of him starting his tenure as CEO, is he changed the language of what we call each other inside the organization. It was no longer team member or employee, but colleague. Mm-hmm. So now, and it still is, and he's gone 2 years, we still refer to each other. It's Sage colleague, my Sage colleague. And you will hear Sage people use that term. We'll say Sage colleague, my Sage colleague, my Sage colleague, my Sage colleague. And this is very weird coming from him because I know you met him on several occasions. He was a very proper and, meretricious Brit, right?
Yeah. And tall. Yeah.
Like drop dead, beautiful kind of guy. He looks exactly like the guy in The Crown who played Prince Philip in the first season. I think they were separated at birth, but there's
him. I agree. Him, but a little Conan O'Brien too.
Yeah. There's a little Conan O'Brien, but I will say this. So he said, if you introduce me, he said this in an internal team meeting, I'm not, and here's our CEO, Stephen Kelly. It's, here's my colleague, Stephen Kelly.
I love that, by the way. We really try to embrace that here. And
right. So it's that, but point is that language changes matters in people's brain.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you and I were talking at one point, and we had a great analogy to this language and the word. I think it was train.
Yes, training versus education. So this is a lot of companies provide training. In fact, I heard somebody said this earlier to me today, and I actually had a chance to talk about this. This is the second time today. But if Sarah, you're a marketing person, what can you charge more for, training or education?
Training.
Oh, Sarah.
Training? You can charge more for training or education?
Education.
Education, right? Because think about education.
Fool me twice. What is it? Fool me once.
Education. And think about it. Like education from a perspective is if I go to a school and I'm educated, right? I get what
I
trained?
see. Like versus like going to like a tech. Program.
Horses and dogs are trained. We're potty trained, for God's sake. So here, but here's the coup de grace on this. Would you rather your 17-year-old go to sex training or sex education class?
Education.
Right. I think that says a lot right there. Well, let me think about that for a second.
No. Think about their age. Your 17-year-old child.
Yeah, we don't want them going to sex training. That would be. That's a whole different industry.
It's a whole different industry, but the point is, and I think this is important, and it's crass, I admit it, but with a moral point. Education has a moral component to it. Education has a righteousness about it that training doesn't.
I really like that.
Yeah, but that shifts my thing, because in business, I see that but in business, when we think about monetary, it's really the training. I think about the training courses that we're spending money on, not necessarily going to a webinar to learn for education. So it's a little bit of a.
How about instead of, and this is where you can include a modifier, product education. So product education as opposed to training. I personally would rather be educated.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So educate me on the product, on the use of your product. Don't train me. Train, whips. You will be trained.
Here he goes again, back to another industry.
So
it makes sense.
Yeah, and by the way, and I love words. My dad taught Latin, and he would often remember that the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding? You guys saw that one, right? And there's the running gag in there, give me a word, then I'll tell you how the origin is Greek, and they would throw stuff at him. So, but it was like that growing up in my house, except with Latin. So my dad would be, mortgage. You know what mortgage means? What, Dad? Well, it's a concatenation of two Latin words, mort, which means, you guys probably know this one, mort. Death.
Yeah, I know.
Death. Yeah.
Right? Mortuary, right? Death. And gage, which is Latin for pledge. A mortgage is a death pledge.
Ooh. Ooh.
Makes total sense now, doesn't it?
I just signed a mortgage, and I'm not happy with this.
Yeah, you just bought a house with a mortgage.
But it's a death pledge, pretty much, Brian. I'm just saying, they got you first more than anything. But here's the thing: education comes from the same Latin as extrude. It's to draw out of. When we're educating someone, what we're doing is we're drawing what they already have out of them, rather than training, which is putting crap in. Right. So what we're doing is we're taking their knowledge and extracting it from them so that they can bring what their gift to the fore.
He sure leaves us with certain things to think about, doesn't he? Hey, so let me ask you this question, and I'm not sure there's an answer to this. Is there a role in technology here? How can tech be used to support the changes in business thinking?
Absolutely. There's this huge role for technology in all of this, because what technology does is enable us to do things more effectively for others. One of the things you were talking about earlier was this fear about machine learning and artificial intelligence taking away our jobs. Artificial intelligence and machine learning will take away tasks.
Right.
But it won't take away jobs.
Right. And
the reason is because we as human beings are incredibly creative in our ability to come up with new and innovative ways to serve our fellow man. And this goes back to my why. Entrepreneurs continue the work of creation. Jobs that exist today did not exist 5, 10, 20 years ago. The people who say the jobs are all going away, we're all, and by the way, I count Elon Musk and a lot of these, they all think that we need, UBI because we're just going to sit on the beach and sip martinis and Mai Tais or whatever, while the rest of them do all the work. That's not going to be the case. We are incredibly innovative at coming up with new ways to serve each other. And that's where jobs come from. Jobs come from us thinking about, I can do this for someone else better. This is why the worst idea for capitalism, what I would call capitalism, or better yet, innovism, market innovation, is Wall Street. What a terrible, terrible knowledge. In fact, that I talked about zero-sum game. There's a line in Wall Street. It's a zero-sum game. It's a zero-sum game. Wealth isn't created or destroyed, merely transferred from one perception to the other. It's wrong. The best movie to understand the wonders of innovism, market capitalism, is Pay It Forward. Is how can I figure out a way to serve someone else, even though I don't even know who they are. I submit to you that all of the time that you're spent in educating yourself and growing, the people listening to this podcast are learning today so that they can serve a future customer that they don't even know exists today. That is altruism.
Impactful.
I'm growing my knowledge every day so that I can help somebody in the future with it. That's why I want to learn.
And so, you mentioned artificial intelligence and how I see it, and I think in how you've discussed technology in this role is it's releasing humans from these repetitive, perhaps, tasks and allowing them to increase their creation.
Yeah.
To be able to better serve the next one.
Absolutely. In fact, the book I was reading before the one that I mentioned, it was by Virginia Prostrel, and it's called The Fabric of Civilization. And it's all about the history of fabric.
So it's simply really the evolution that's going to take place. We have evolved 100 years ago. We were not doing what we're doing today.
And so one of the things that she brings out is a pair of jeans, a pair of blue jeans, has 6 miles of thread.
Wow, who knew?
And it would have taken.
And don't say it, Sarah. Mine do not have 10 miles.
But we hear all about. In fact, the looming industry is one that oftentimes is used in the examples that we talk about of jobs being taken away.
Yeah. But
the real jobs that were originally taken away were from the spinners who were creating the thread. I mean, most of human history, and women spent the overwhelming majority of their adult lives spinning thread.
Wow.
Because it took 6 miles to make a pair of pants.
Yeah, right. Right.
Nevertheless, a sail, which is like 60 miles, or a bed sheet, or all of these, and we don't even think about clothes. So what Prostrel puts forward in this book, and I love this. How the idea that any sufficiently advanced technology would be viewed today as magic. I think that's Isaac Asimov. Right. If you didn't know what a remote control was, you would think that was magic. That's how it did it. It was absolutely magical. Right. So, but she says the inverse is also true, that anything that we absolutely take for granted is viewed as just part of history. Like, we don't appreciate the fact that the clothes that we wear, all of the fabric around us, took thousands of years to create this incredible industry that now employs so few people as to be mind-boggling, yet clothes all 7 billion people.
Yeah, man. It's always fascinating to hear you because you are a true intellectual, but you make it easier for me to understand, because you sometimes have to talk to me like I'm a 5-year-old. 6 maybe. So, and you do a good job at that, but you always enlighten, and I really appreciate that. But this is a good segue to our tech-tainment session. This is
tech-tainment.
This is rather new.
Okay.
We're going to ask you a couple of questions that reveal a little bit about yourself.
Sure.
And so, are you ready?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. Here we go. What's the one topping you don't believe belongs on a pizza?
Pineapple, no question.
Yes, Ed.
Yeah, okay, me too.
Totally agree.
Horrendous thinking of
No,
it.
Hawaiian
pizza. You ruin pizza with that's this
fruit in general, right?
No,
I don't mind it. I'm like either or.
Okay.
Somehow, okay, yeah. That I could have probably guessed that with Brian. What do you think?
Totally a pineapple pizza guy.
All right, early bird or night owl? This is, I think, very interesting for you. Early bird or night owl?
Gosh, I will have to say that I alternate between the two of those. It's very weird. I tend to be more seasonal. So if I guess that's part bear or something, but I tend to sleep longer in the winter and go to bed earlier, and then during the summer I spend way more time awake and functional. So it's more of a seasonal thing for me.
Interesting.
Which is odd.
Let me ask you this: do you eat more berries during the winter?
Yeah,
okay,
no,
that was silly.
Yeah, I'm sleeping.
I
probably drink more though. That could be the reason. Now that I think about it, so it could be the grapes and the wine that might be doing it.
All right, last question, and this one I got a kick out of our extraordinary podcast producer has given me this one. Would you rather fight 100 duck-sized horses or one horse-sized duck?
I have to first get the images in my mind for that, what that would be like. Yep. I think the one horse-sized duck, because you got 100 things flying around you or running around you, you got no chance. At least with one thing, you can sort of keep it in front of you. That's the way I would look at it.
I'm still up in the air.
A duck? Ducks are like the meanest.
They are.
You just get a bunch of bags of bread. I'm with Ed. One horse-sized duck. Feed it some bread to scratch.
But I can. But they also can't run for shit. I mean, so I'll probably. I'm sorry if you have to bleep that out. I don't know if you guys are.
No, we don't bleep anything out. No, we don't bleep.
We'll
listen, hey, this has been awesome. We want to thank you for joining us. It's Ed Kless from Sage Software. Can you tell the folks how they get a hold of you or find you?
Sure, a couple different ways, but ed.kless@sage.com is the email address. Love to hear from people. I would love for you also to listen to my radio show and podcast, thesoulofenterprise.com, and you can go to that and see the website where we do have show notes to all 300 or so plus shows that we've done previously, and as well as previews to upcoming shows. So
good plug. It's an awesome show. I want to thank our marketing maven, Sarah Reed, our podcast producer, Brian Anderson, music by Sam Ward, and I hope I get this right, Davinio Productions for the edit. Did I do it? Did I
not even
Davinio?
Davinio. Jeez, I'm so sorry. You know what? Hopefully they're going to get more from this because they do all our editing. Davinio.
Yep.
Davinio.
There it is.
They do all our editing. They do our distribution for this podcast, which can be found everywhere podcasts are found: Spotify, Apple, wherever else they're found. So I want to thank you very much again, Es, for joining us, and we wish you the best. Have a great day.
Thanks so much.